What if everything you learned about the dawn of civilization, the pyramids, the pharaohs, the slow march of human progress was a carefully constructed lie? What if our history is not a record of our beginnings, but a story written over an erased truth? This is not a tale of dusty relics and forgotten kings. This is the story of a single discovery, a silent bomb planted in the foundations of history, which has just detonated. Prepare to enter the sands of Egypt, not as you know them, but as they truly were, the staging ground for a mystery that reaches for the stars. I would like to suggest that you have a cup of coffee, my buddy, since this is not simply a narrative about a tomb. In this tale, a key is discovered in the shadows, and it is this key that opens a door that we were completely unaware existed. Although the official report will refer to it as KUB 65, those of us who are privy to its secrets refer to it as the tomb of the Starward Pharaoh. Put out of your mind anything you were taught in school about an Egyptian civilization that developed in a linear and isolated fashion along the Nile. The tale is transformed from a history lesson into a cosmic enigma as a result of the find that was made in a desert wadi to the west of Thebes. The discovery was concealed beneath a landslide of well-built limestone that precisely mirrored the rock that was close by. This is the doorway that ought not to be. A geologist named Dr. Aris Thorne, who was mapping cracks using ground-penetrating radar, discovered a perfect emptiness that was not natural. This was the beginning of the process, when the archaeological team, which was directed by the tireless Dr. Elena Petrova, took the time to eventually remove the rubble. They discovered not a huge and imposing entryway, but rather a door that was made of obsidian and was completely flawless. There was no other stonework in Egypt quite like it. Even though it was scorching hot in the desert, it was absolutely smooth and had a cool sensation to the touch. The true surprise came when they discovered the mechanism that locked the door. The bar or seal was not of a primitive kind, inscribed not with hieroglyphs, but with a complicated pattern of dots, lines, and constellations. It was a circular depression filled with a succession of concentric, spinning rings. The rings were overlapping and rotating around one another. To all intents and purposes, it was a combination lock that was 4,500 years old, and its code was inscribed in the language with which the stars communicate. They matched the rings with the location of Orion's belt, as it would have been in the year 2500 BC. After spending many weeks researching precession and ancient star charts until they reached the desired alignment, the door slid sideways into the wall, a technique that was not seen again until the 20th century. The door made a loud, resonant hum that vibrated in their bones. An abode that belonged to a heavenly monarch. There was a sterile, dry, and eerily motionless air within the compartment. Unlike the typical depictions of gods and judgment, the walls were not painted with such images. They were covered with diagrams that can only be characterized as schematics when they were examined. On one of the walls, there was a precise cutaway image of a pyramid that represented it not as a tomb, but rather as a complicated mechanism. Labels displayed on the wall pointed to energy conduits and resonance chambers. On the other hand, the sarcophagus was the focal point. He cut it out of a single piece of pure quartz, which was as transparent as water from a mountain spring. Inside, the pharaoh was lying. The Lord of the Ca of Pata was the name that was cobbled together from the few ceremonial objects that were found there. His name was Neb. He was tall, standing over 7 feet tall, with a cranium that was extended and hands that were oddly lengthy and folded over his chest. He had 6 fingers. It was not linen that he was wrapped in. He was dressed in a suit made of a metallic mesh that was flexible and nevertheless had a dull shine to it. Obsidian lenses that had been polished were placed over both of his eyes. The individual in question was not a guy who was ready for the underworld. Rather, he was an engineer who was ready for traveling. The historical library that rewrote the past, there was no gold, but rather knowledge that was the ultimate treasure. They discovered hundreds of thin, crystalline tablets in a room that was close to the one where they discovered papyrus scrolls. The tablets displayed 3D interactive star maps and complicated texts when they were illuminated by a concentrated light source, which was a technique that the team had to build on the fly. It was at this point when our history was shattered. From the perspective of the pre-dynastic pantheon, the literature referred to the Zeptepi, also known as the First Time, not as a legendary period, but rather as a historical affair. It detailed creatures, known as the Bringers of Order, who emerged from the stars of Orion and Sirius after a catastrophic catastrophe that occurred on a global scale, confirming a recollection that had been lost of an impact event that occurred a younger. In addition to providing the Egyptians with technology, they also interbred with them, resulting in the creation of a hybrid lineage of rulers. A member of this pure line, Nebkapita was one of the last of his kind. It was easy to understand the blueprints for the pyramids as power plants. More than just tombs, the Great Pyramid of Giza and other structures like it were more than that. For the purpose of amplifying a sort of resonant energy, these geomechanical devices were developed to tap into the telluric currents that run through the Earth. This energy was used for the purpose of worldwide communication, the manipulation of the atmosphere, and perhaps, as the star maps showed, the creation of a stable path or doorway for interstellar travel. Not only did the star charts depict Egypt, but they also depicted other things. There were luminous nodes that marked other locations on the Earth, such as Göbekli, Tepe Machu Picchu, Easter Island, and Stonehenge. They displayed the whole planet. It was built to heal the Earth and lead the growth of mankind after the apocalypse, according to the translations, and all of them were a part of a single, synchronized network. This network was an old global internet of power and information. During the Great Schism, the records come to an end with a portion of the priesthood rose up in rebellion, either out of fear of this power or out of desire to possess it for themselves. They were responsible for the murder of Nebkapita and his relatives, as well as the suppression of the truth and the rewriting of story. The advanced science of the Star Kings was replaced with a religion that was more straightforward and easier to govern, consisting of gods with animal heads and adherence to rituals. The original function of the pyramids was lost to the passage of time, and they were repurposed as majestic tombs in order to solidify their newfound pharaonic dominance, that which is still unanswered. It might be said that the tomb of the Starward Pharaoh does more than merely offer a new chapter to the history of Egypt. In doing so, it rips the existing book in two. It gives the impression that the pinnacle of Egyptian civilization was not the culminating point of a human journey, but rather the waning echo of a society that was far older, significantly more sophisticated, and perhaps hybrid. It is not true that we are the descendants of a primitive race who gradually discovered fire. We are the dispersed progeny of a worldwide society that once harnessed the power of the earth itself and gazed to the heavens, not with awe, but with recognition. This civilization has now fallen into disarray. Nebkapita is now resting in his casket made of quartz, a mute witness to a reality that was purposefully concealed from us until now. Not, what did the Egyptians build, but rather, what were they meant to become, is the question that has to be asked at this point. What happened to the bringers of order is far more frightening than that. Is it possible that they are still present and waiting for the network to go inactive? Under a level of secrecy that is more stringent than any nuclear secret, the tomb is once again sealed. Due to the fact that this is not only an archaeological discovery, it is a message in a bottle, and we have just finished reading the first sentence, which is very devastating.